Hi folks, this is John Watson, International Master John Watson, and this is Ask the Master. We're going to have another show here, take a few moves back. The main idea of this show is to provide players with a forum to ask questions about chess and the chess world. So you can send questions to me, which is mostly what I'll be using in advance, or if you're tuning in live on the YouTube ICC, you can participate in the chat, which is right on the right of the screen, and ask me questions right now.
Hi folks, this is John.
I have to turn my sound off, obviously. Give me a second here.
We're going to have another show here. Take a few moves back.
There we go. Sorry, little feedback there. Where were we? Okay. I'm generally giving priority to questions that I received beforehand, because then you can be more precise, and I can look it up and actually see think about what I'm going to say. There are three ways to submit questions in advance. Anytime during the week. It's best to submit them up to the day before the show, and I really think the best way to do it is send an email to my email address, askimwatson, ASKIMWATSON, at chessclub.com. So that's askimwatson at chessclub.com. I'll get that right away. We also have a Twitter channel, which we aren't using very much, but you can try it if you want to. I do look at it from time to time. It's hashtag askimwatson. And then the last way is to send a message to my ICC handle, which is John L. Watson, JOHNLWATSON. So that's on ICC, which is another way to reach me. But of course, those are shortened messages, so not quite as convenient. And as I say, you can also ask right now live on the chat, which is to the right on your page on YouTube. And a few areas I have expertise in are chess opening, since I've played, taught, and written about almost all of them over the years. Chess strategy, leading players, chess history, chess books and videos, and we've got a whole bunch of a real nice variety of questions this week. I'll try to cover some old questions first, ones that I promised you I'd look at or talk about, and then move on to new ones or mix in the new ones. There are a whole bunch of new ones, which is nice. And thank you very much for sending me questions, by the way. Okay, first, so let me catch up on a few of these. Let's do the first one. I was asked about the Blackmar-Diemer Gambit. This one goes way back. I already talked about this on November 10th of last year, but so I'm not. You can go back and look at that. But on the other hand, I think I will also give a quick review of what I said there, and I mean really quick, partly because I don't have it in front of me. So basically, what is the Blackmar-Diemer Gambit? It's this. And since I've been asked twice, there must be some reason to, well, actually, let's not do it that way. If you do it this way, black has an extra option of that called the Hübsch Gambit, and that one's pretty good for black. So really, if you're going to play the Blackmar-Diemer, you should play this first, and then white attacks it and black defends it. And this is the Gambit. You give up an extra pawn. And what I showed you is two different defenses, and one of them is called the Ziegler defense. It's really the simplest. Just go there. And it's a good solid move. It means the queen can come out sometimes. For example, if there's a bishop there, it covers d5, which is an extremely important square. It stops anything on b5. Excuse me, let's do that again. And so white, in order to keep attacking, he's a full pawn down, will almost undoubtedly play that move. And his hope is that you'll play here. And then there's this wonderful little trick here, attacking the bishop twice. And if the bishop takes queen, of course, you have a checkmate. So here's an incentive to play the Blackmar-Diemer as white. So really black can't go back because you simply take it and then checkmate anyway. So black would play here, and that's really awful. This position, if you're familiar with these, the black's pieces never get out because that's so terrible. Very easy. You can even play a g4, g5 idea, probably castle first, put a bishop on f4. Okay, so what's good for black, though, is just to develop. There's several ways to do this, but the easiest is just put this here. And white probably castles, and black just plays here. And now black's a pawn up for virtually nothing. White can play this kind of move, but black can either play defensively like that or just unpin. And just generally here, black's a pawn up for nothing. It's just very solid. And you can go back and look at that lecture if you want to see. But I thought I'd mention that because I just got that question again this week. So Even better, by the way, than bishop e7, I should mention that, is knight b d7, because it works against the move knight e5. Knight e5 could have been played last move, for example. But knight b d7 is good. Then you put the bishop here, where it's a nice aggressive square and covers there. Okay, so that's a solution to the Blackmar-Diemer, and it's pretty easy to learn. So let me see what I'm going to talk about next. I was asked again, okay, so we're covering old questions. I asked again about books on chess psychology. This one was on the March 8th show, so you can go back there and take a look at that. But to recap very briefly, I mentioned Krogius's book, Psychology in Chess, as the best old one, especially on a practical level. There's also something called Practical Chess Psychology by Avni, and it's very readable. And as far as books that touch heavily upon psychology, I particularly recommended Rowson's book, The 7 Deadly Chess Sins, which has some great commentary about how to think. Also, Chess for Zebras he wrote, which is also useful. And very recently, we have Tugmakov's book, Risk and Bluff in Chess, and a book by Stewart called Chess Psychology, The Will to Win. These are very recent books, but I haven't read either one of them, but just thought I'd mention it because they're new books, and it's always fun to see new books. So, okay, let's just move on to another question. I don't see anybody on the chat yet, unless I have it misaligned, and I don't think I do. So, let's just keep going here. I was asked, how should one improve his visualization? I struggle to visualize a position after, say, a forcing sequence of 4 to 5 moves and evaluate whether that position will be good for me. And we all have this problem. If there were any easy way or any easy method to visualize positions that you're thinking about, everyone would be using it. There's no simple answer to this question. Clear visualization in force sequences and after positional moves, after 4 or 5 positional moves, or even 2 or 3, is arguably the most important thing in chess. It's the thing that's hardest to do. So one thing that's going to improve it is just practice, calculation practice and playing practice and concentration during the time you're practicing. That's basically what people do to improve that skill. But I will say that blindfold chess is often mentioned as a way to improve your visualization. And another method is to close your eyes and visualize the color of each square. For example, you might ask, well, what color is the square C5? It's black. And what's F5? It's white. And do that a lot. Blindfold players use this technique. Just practice doing that for every square and do it fairly often, and that helps your visualization a little bit. So you could combine these exercises with play and with practice on tactical positions, for example. But in the end, it takes a lot of hard work to try to improve your visualization. Okay. So that's that question. Now, a fun question that I got, which usually historical questions tend to be really fun. It's who do you think was the greatest player never to become world champion? So I think that's a fun question because there's so many possible answers. And I think in first place, or tied for first anyway, would be Korchnoi, because he not only played a couple times for the world championship, but he was among the top players in the world for many, many years, maybe even 20 years or so, and even then afterwards he still had a very high rating. So his career spanned for so long at the top. He's an extremely strong player. So I think he'd be about number 1. But the same is true for Reshevsky, who was at the top of the world for just about as long as Korchnoi, or at least a very strong player for that long, and at the top of the world for possibly, arguably even longer, for maybe 25 years or so. And he was even number 1 in retrospective historical ratings, which is not true of Korchnoi, who was number 2, although clearly number 2. And the difference is that he didn't play a world championship match, and he didn't qualify for, well, he played 1 world championship tournament and did well, but not, I would say, extremely well. So that's maybe a disadvantage, but basically those 2 are the most impressive by quite a large margin, I think. Now, other people mention, and I think they deserve it, Carey's and Rubinstein. Carey's had a very long and successful career and almost made the World Championship several times, whereas Rubinstein was a complete genius for the time that he lived, did very well for the time he played, which was a little shorter in terms of being in good health and playing. but those two are in third and fourth place. Then I thought I'd mention a few other names. Lajos Portish was extremely strong and just didn't manage to qualify out of the candidates. And in our time, I was thinking maybe Ivanchuk would be a name. I should have looked at a big list to see for sure who might be in that list. But that's the only one I could really think of who didn't actually win the World Championship. Not sure. I mean, right now I'm thinking, and I've probably missed somebody more modern. So that would be a few people. If those of you who are on the chat might think about who else might deserve a mention. This is the strongest player who didn't win the World Championship. Some of the strongest players. So now I've got some very complicated questions. It'll be a little time-consuming to answer, but I'd like to do some things in detail. I think the one about the rook and bishop versus rook ending is probably the most complicated, so I'll skip that for a second. But there's another opening question that I've been promising for several weeks. It's about the Albin Countergambit. Can you recommend a line? And I just gave a very superficial answer to that before, but I got that question again, and I'm thinking maybe I should address this more seriously. So here's the first system. This is the Albin Countergambit against the Queen's Gambit here. And the idea is that when white takes here, which is his best move, black plays here and tries to cramp white's game. And white usually plays here, developing a piece, getting closer to castling and attacking this pawn, and black defends, because if black defends with this move, he's just not developing quickly enough, and you break up the center and get this piece developed. Remember, white's a pawn ahead. So the normal way to do that is this, which retains this idea, by the way. For example, if white plays here, that's considered a weak move because of this check. And then if this, you have this nice little move. So that's, I won't show you all the traps there, but I think I mentioned this in the other time I was talking about this opening. So white often plays a move like a3, here is very common, or g3, and you could argue that both of those may give you a small advantage. g3 is pretty much the traditional move. But they really are small, those advantages. So the move that Eric Schiller and I for about 30 years have recommended and put in several books and tried to refine is this move, because it develops a piece and it gets ready to make a very direct attack on that pawn. For example, if there's a bishop on c5, it's going to be attacked as well as this pawn. So it's a little bit more, it's more difficult for black in some ways, that he has to play pretty accurately, not just to lose a second pawn. And I like the fact that it develops a piece. It can also go here, with the idea of playing bishop up, and then the knight has even more influence on the game. And of course that you can always go back to g3 or a3 as moves. So I thought I would maybe take a quick look at some of the options here. Yeah, just for example, I should also mention that if bishop c5, instead of knight c6, that's again the best move, because you're going to play this with tempo. In fact, this position is extremely good for white. So knight bd2, and now what can black do? A lot of moves. This is probably the main move. It's the one that's played most. It's the most natural move because it has the idea of putting pressure this way, getting ready to castle queenside, and if this knight ends up being moved or being taken, then at least you can take that knight and then take on e5 and get your pawn back. So that's the main move, but there's a lot of others. There's actually 7 other moves. I'm not going to show you all of them, but one is just looks very simple to play here. But the problem is then you're giving up one of your bishops, and this kind of position is quite good. Now, a good answer here, bishop takes, is obviously fine, but a good answer here is this move. The reason for that is that you're reserving the idea of playing here and then bishop here quickly, and there's no way to attack that queen. So that's probably the easiest way to play this. For example, here you just play here. And then if he starts trying to grab material like that, you can take either way, actually. I'm not sure which one's best, but the point is that, okay, he got his pawn back, but he's being harassed with the 2 bishops, which can go like this. There's even a d-file attack, and this is a terrible position. Even though you got your pawn back, black's in big trouble, mainly because of the bishop pair. So that's bishop b4, which is, you can see, why give up such a good piece? It's probably not a very logical move anyway. Queen e7 is interesting. Again, just trying to get the piece back immediately. And just for fun, let me show you why that might be kind of interesting. If white got careless here, there's the famous checkmate here. Never know, right? But watch out for that one. It's one that happens at the Budapest too. Budapest opening. But in all seriousness, after this, now a5 is still a very good move, because knight takes e5, you can just take it. Don't allow that checkmate. And then you can take back, and guess what? You're on another pawn, you're gaining time. Black's behind in development. He's supposed to be ahead in development in return for a pawn. And instead he's behind. So a3 is certainly a legitimate move. Black would probably play this move, try to castle quickly, maybe get d3 in at some point. But this tends to be pretty good for white. For example, here, castles, just allow d3. Maybe f6 is best now, but you just take it and then fianchetto and get castled. That's better for white. What else can you do? You can play, well, again, if you take here, you're running right into, well, let's look at it. Actually, it's not completely simple, is it? I think, what's the easiest move here? Probably taking and playing knight up again with 3 pieces on this. Yeah, that'll do it. So usually f6 is played, but f6 isn't really much better. It keeps now your pawn down sort of permanently, and then white plays for g3 and bishop g2, and it just turns out this works very well. I can kind of go into that, but I wonder if it's worth it, because we don't want to spend too much time. As usual, we've got a lot of questions to get through. The easiest move after g3, if you want something incredibly safe, just to show you how good the overall system is, you always have these options, is just get your pieces out. That's actually even arguably the best move. If he takes, it's got the same old problem, taking, bishop g2, knight f3. You just lose too much time, so this is probably the best move. But even though he gets castled quickly, he has no way of making progress here, and you're still a pawn ahead. So an obvious move is to try this. That's one of black's main ideas, but in this particular case, you're giving white too much time. For example, this move is quite good. So is queen e2, which was played in one game. But this is quite good because there's pressure on this pawn and this square after you move the knight. So this is actually extremely strong. Even though, yeah, well, anyway. So white usually ends up material ahead with a lead in development, so you can see that that's really a problem. Okay, that's queen e7. Now let me see how many other moves I want to take a quick look at. f6 is just not a very good move. You just take it. And even if the queen gets out of the way, oh, excuse me, that's after, that's in this position. And even if the queen sort of gets out of the way to get castled quickly, then just knight b3 is good, g3 is good, and if you want to, you can play a3 just to stop any pieces from coming to b4 and prepare b4 yourself. So, yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. I guess this in order to get castled quickly, and then maybe just here to attack this and threaten, but now you can't castle because of bishop g5. You can see how this is going because white's starting to catch up in development. Might even go for that d pawn, something like this. Maybe this first, and if the queen moves, you start taking pawns. So you can imagine this is simply not working very well. That's f6, which is played quite a bit, by the way. That's why I showed that. That kind of idea for black is played quite a bit, because black thinks, oh, I'll get this big lead in development. Now let me just show you some other stuff. Knight g7 is the most popular line. Well, among people who really know what they're doing in the books. This is the move that's most recommended. Now you can play a3 with a good move, a good line. I'm not going to go into detail because knight b3 is the most natural move, attacking the d pawn, and then black tries to defend it. And you can play a3, but it's a little messy, and that's why black plays this line. But it turns out that is a fantastic move. He has to take it en passant. And then you take, and he takes. And if king takes, it's exposed to extra tempi. You can take either way. Probably this way first. And then there's ideas of this, and checking this way. You're still a pawn ahead. So that doesn't work. So knight takes is natural and the best. Now, you can take either way, but I think that's the best way, because what it means is the king can always go to f2, and the pawn can come to e4, and you're still a pawn ahead. And this looks kind of crazy at first because you have an open file against two weak pawns, but black can't get coordinated to do that. And what happens is very quickly, this is an anchor point for your pieces. Let me just show you a couple more moves here. If check to try to keep the king in the center, and then coming back before he gets attacked, then this is a strong move. Just getting centralized, and then bishop here, winning a tempo on that knight. And is it worth showing much else? Check is probably not a very good move, because you're kind of going that direction anyway. So knight c6 maybe, back to c6, try to get pressure on the pawn, and pressure on d4, but the problem is you play here anyway. And then when he takes here, you're going to straighten out your pawns and be a pawn up for nothing. So probably check now. Same idea. Just get your pieces out quickly, try to get a rook to e8, and try to castle queenside. Is that, let me see, what's maybe better than all this? Yeah, that's really nothing to do here. You probably might have to take this at some point and try to win the d pawn, but of course you won't because he just plays here. And here and rook here. Simple enough. There's other ways to do this. You can also play rook c1 because there's things about trapping that bishop, and also this is going to come out fast. Anyway, this is all pretty straightforward. Yeah, rook c1 isn't quite as good. Rook d1 isn't quite as good because of a combination of those moves. So actually rook c1 is probably a better move. And black never gets his pawn back without you having a tremendous game. Okay, so the main line, what was the main line I was showing you? Bishop g4. I guess that's enough ideas. The main line that I was showing, the main line is probably knight e7, which I just showed you. But the other move is this, the most natural move that's played in other positions. Now a3 is supposed to be best, and it's supposed to be a little better for white, but this is an interesting move, attacking here. And I think that's a really good way to play. Because if he plays here or something, then he can't get castled queenside, which is the whole idea. And if he plays here, you don't really have to bother capturing. You can just create some pressure here. And then he probably will try to get to that diagonal. And then this move, just to stop anything from coming to b4. Here, and now you break in the center. It turns out this position is actually quite good. Probably has to take that, because otherwise the queen comes to c3 if d3. Here. And now b4, b5 is a big threat. And this is pretty easy to play. So I guess I won't go into any more detail. b4, bishop b2, b5, castling queenside. This time white's going to castle queenside. Okay, long answer, but at least we got that answered for after being asked a couple of times. So let me stop that. Okay, moving on. Rubinstein I did say, yes. I mentioned Rubinstein as number 4. I think I had Carries as number 3 and Rubinstein as number 4, but they're all very close to each other. Okay, so that's the Albin Countergambit. I'm going to kind of whip through these because we had so many great questions. And I want to get these in order. Oh, winning bishop versus rook. That's pretty tough. That's going to take a little time. Rook and bishop versus rook. We had this last time, and I promised to answer it. It's kind of a mess. I have 2 games, but I'm not going to show all the game. I'm just going to show the ending and try to simplify. And then what you'll have to do is go to an in-game book and look this up. The great thing about rook and bishop versus rook is, well, first of all, everybody gets it at some point or another. So that's one thing. And I'm actually surprised that I got to this position right away. But anyway. Oh, and the best players in history have almost all misplayed this at one point or another. Either failed to win if they were winning at some point, or failed to draw. Usually failed to draw. It's amazing how often white wins this, even though it's a theoretical draw. This goes way back from the 19th century to right up to the present. And in fact, even in this Caruana-Svidler game that we're going to talk about, Svidler allowed a win from a drawn position. It's amazing how often people don't get this right, even though you'll find good players will always say, oh no, this is simple, I'll just use the second rank defense or the Cochrane defense. And then when in an actual game, they somehow don't find that. So this game is an example of playing pinning from a distance. And the idea means that you're going to stay away from the king, but you're going to stop the king from getting close to black's king. See, white's idea is to maneuver these pieces and get the king onto the 6th rank at some point, trap the king back on this row, and then make mate threats until somehow black isn't able to protect them. So one simple defense to this is to not let it get that far by keeping the king from advancing. So here's an example. The bishop goes here, otherwise these are going backwards. Here, now we have rook g7 check. Actually, I have these on here. King h4, and the idea of that is the king can't approach to organize a checkmate. So king e5 is tried, and then if you check, maybe he's going to go up here. That's at least the thought. If instead of king e5, you just waste time until white's king tries to make some progress. So the little rule here, there is a little rule, is go the opposite direction. If you go here, it turns out it's not so, whoops, sorry, excuse me, sorry about that arrow. If you go this way, it turns out that it's not so easy. It's sort of like you cooperating with the king. You're too close. You might as well go the other way, which is what he does. Goes that way to give himself a little extra room. Now, white's kind of fooling around. He's sort of waiting for black to make a move, sort of a Sigswan kind of position. And that's what happens. Black makes that move. And now he's a little closer to the king, so it's not quite as good a square. So white tries a tricky little move there. And black now moves here and opposes the rooks before he gets in trouble. That way, if he's checked, he can just come here. Black really, anytime you get a chance to play that rook move, it's probably a good idea. Because now there's a chance that maybe, it depends what move you make, but there's a chance that you can get in trouble because the bishop becomes active. I guess I won't show you that exactly, but this is a simple way to play it. Just oppose those rooks. So white tries that, and black gets a new square for his king. And what happens eventually here is that you're in almost the same position we started with. You kind of are, you'll see that. Because here we are in the initial position again, pretty much, and black checks, and the white king can't get to the 6th rank. This king's going to be back here, but once again, there's no way to make progress with the king. So we could even just stop here, probably. I'll just show you what it is. This is almost the exact position we had. There we go. And the king can't approach because of where the rook is. So you might want to go back and look that over, because it looks easy, but it always turns out it's not so easy. And let me show you the actual Svidler-Caruana game that we talked about, which was, let me get that up for you. I think Caruana set it for the game. I know how to win these. He got to a winning position. I've studied this time and again, but I can't remember, which shows you how hard it is. Some of the world champions have messed up this position quite a lot. Okay, this is from the beginning of the game. I'm not going to show you the beginning. So let's just buzz through to the ending where we get the actual pure rook and bishop first. So there it is. Beautiful game, by the way, if you want to look it over. All kinds of interesting things. Maybe we start before this, yeah. And maybe even a bit before this. What move are we on? Move 70. Okay, we can just sort of start wandering through here. At first, it's very much like what we just saw. The difference this time is we're going to look at the 2nd rank defense. He's going to keep his rook on the 2nd rank instead of getting behind. So this is the other way to defend. I think it's the favorite among top players is to play the 2nd rank defense. By the way, Magnus Carlsen messed this up once. Okay, I think we'll go a little further before I'll start talking about it. So far, nothing's really happening. And very soon here, white makes a serious try to make progress. Okay, now why did he do that? Why did he go off the 2nd rank? And the answer may be that I'm not sure. I think it's getting to the point where this is getting a little dangerous with background. I mean, that's actually a mate threat now, because the king has nowhere to go. The king would have to go to one of these squares and he'd get mated. So there's actually a threat now. So black coordinates to stop that threat by playing here, which gives him some extra room over there. And white plays here. And let me go a couple more moves. Check here. Okay, so now this is sort of the 2nd rank if black goes to this corner. So he's still defending with the 2nd rank technique. And let me show you the point of the 2nd rank technique in a second. think I already missed something I wanted to show you, but yeah. If white plays here, you might wonder why doesn't white just play really simply here? And now he's really getting some threats because the king's getting where he wanted to. Remember I told you he couldn't get to the 6th rank? But in the 2nd rank defense, it doesn't matter because you have that nice move. And if he takes it, it's a stalemate. And if he doesn't take it, then he's being chased away again. You know, you can just keep checking him, or the king gets to the wrong square. So, because that still gives black's king more room to move to. So that king c6 doesn't work, and he doesn't try it. He plays this instead, this check. And now you got to watch out, because after that move there's check, and that's big trouble, because this move, for example, is made. So you still have to be careful as black, but he's going to keep his king on the, excuse me, where were we here? We were going back a couple moves. I'll check. So he goes up this way, and this still should be a supposedly easy draw, but it's never easy. White tries to kind of block off the king. Black continues his 2nd rank defense, but it might have been easier to run away from the king like we talked about before. It might have been easier to play this move and just get over to this side of the board as fast as possible. It's probably a better way to draw. This is a little more complicated. But he knows that if you just keep your king on the 2nd rank, that's the rook on the 2nd rank, that's another way to draw. Okay, so the king leaves the last rank for a second, gets as far away as possible from this king. There's a little check. Now he's probably better off getting way far away from the king, but he's not worried. It's sort of a standard position. He's hoping that white's going to repeat. But white goes back there, and now both sides just make moves for a while. So I'm not going to show you any of this. You can go over this later. Notice that white was threatening rook mate, but again, now we're switching almost to the other idea, making sure the king can't come too far over here by pinning this bishop and or blocking him off. So a lot of moves have been made, and he's heading for the 50 move rule. And so now that move is funny. He's sort of switching ideas. It's not the easiest. The easiest was simply to check. Not sure why he switched plans. I think he thought he could pretty much do anything. I'm sorry, the easiest was to check here. And I won't show you the details there, but that's a good way to play it. What he did wasn't losing or anything. But this move turns out to be a terrible move. There's actually only one way to draw here, which means black's last move was too careless. And the way to draw is go this way. And just for example, if white's rook comes back here, you'll see why that's a good move soon. And black checks, and white plays here. Then it turns out you can simply play. Is that right? Let me just see this. Oh, just here. The same idea, sort of keeping your distance. And after check, you're able to go here. So that's not really a problem. Okay, but instead of what happens is, let me see. He plays king a4. Such a subtle mistake. You have to really study these things. I mean, if I played this ending right now, I'd probably mess up, even having just looked at it. You just have to really concentrate, and you'll probably, the reason that people keep losing this ending is because there's always a new idea you need to draw. Someone who knows it really well is going to draw pretty easily. And also remember, by this time you're always tired. It's late in the game, and you're probably short of time too. So here we are. Now we've got that distance thing again going, but the king has managed to come from here all the way up to here, threatening checkmate. So you're still okay, but you know, you aren't okay. We're actually at the point where white should win. Now white only has one win here. It turns out he can play rook here. So you also want to know how to win. That threatens checkmate. And it's actually very complicated because it looks like this protects against checkmate very easily, but white plays this amazing move, stopping this check. And it just turns out with a series of sort of zugzwang moves, white will eventually win this. Oddly enough, after that, this move is winning. It's kind of amazing. Because there's this idea of playing check and then just mating. And because now rook over will be mate if the king's here. If the king's here, excuse me. So amazingly enough, that one wins. And The only other thing black can try is this move, and then this check. It's so irrational. I mean, there's no way to really, for me at least, I can't figure out any way of systematizing this, especially how white wins when black makes a slight mistake. Let me see, do I have this right? Bishop f2, rook f3. Oh, I'm sorry, bishop c5 first. Well, see, there you go. It's not check yet. It's bishop c5 first. Is that right? See, it's just so complicated. Rook b2, king a3, rook e2. No, it was check first, excuse me. It was check first. But somehow I got this messed up. King here, check, king up. Rook f3, rook f... Nope. Okay, hang on. Rook f3, you're going to play bishop c5 first, threatening mates, and then bishop d4. Okay, and believe it or not, this for some reason wins. Because now after rook f3 you have this check. Sorry, that's where that check comes in. And notice that move you're, I think, already finished because of rook down, right? Yeah, this should win. Yeah, and there's nothing to do now about getting mated because that check is coming too if the rook comes back to stop mate. So he has to come the other way. I mean, I don't even know how to explain why this is working, but it is working. So king e3, now you play rook here, and he tries to run away, and you play check again. It's completely crazy. And then the king comes up, and you play this move, threatening bishop c5 check with mate again. And it just turns out there's nothing really to do about that, amazingly enough. He comes back again to stop the mate that way, this one, to stop this mate. And now you have check anyway. And up, I think we're there. Yeah, and then just rook a2. Yeah, so that's that. Anyway, okay, so I show you the game. I'm not even sure if it's worth it at this point. I should be able to revert here. But you get the idea how complicated this is. But it shows you at least what happened. So Caruana had a win, but didn't play it, is what it amounts to. And the game went like that. And Svidler blundered again at the very end, but there wasn't time with the 50-move rule for Caruana to win. So this is all good enough, but then there's another blunder at the end. White should have still played this rook b2 idea at some point. Okay, that's enough of that. Whoops, nice arrow. That's enough of that, but I just want to show you how that worked. And it's a pretty amazing ending. Ooh, here we get a question, Cambridge Springs, and he asked another question, which I'm probably not going to get to this week, but believe me, I have your question, Per Eric. I have it in answered and in order, but I haven't yet, I probably won't get to it this week. Your other question. We'll see if we can do this one. Yeah, maybe I should skip before I show the next one. Yeah, one fun question first. No, because I have to show a game for that. Okay, so let me see if we can answer a chat question. It seems the Cambridge Springs defense is not high on the agenda at the very top. Is there a problem with it there? More importantly, how do you assess it as an adjunctive and or perhaps frequently primarily used approach at the club level? I've had good luck against the Cambridge Springs, so I guess I'm prejudiced. I always think it's pretty easy to play against. So I'm not thrilled with the Cambridge Springs. Let's see what that is. The Cambridge Springs defense is a Queen's Gambit defense. There was a time, not, I don't know, 10, 15, maybe 15 years ago, where it got kind of popular again. In the Cambridge Springs, you don't play bishop e7, you play knight here. And then when white develops with either e3 or knight f3, you play here. And when white plays here, you play there. Now, there are ways to avoid the Cambridge Springs if you want to. And the idea is to play this move knight e4 now that you've unpinned the knight. And you have a combination of ideas playing here so that you can attack this way too. So the first idea is knight e4 is the point. And it's considered a sound opening, or has been considered sound, but I think there's ways for white to get little advantages. This is the traditional move. And then black plays here to attack this. And white voluntarily gives up the bishop here, but he has a huge cramping position. And this is how most of the people at the top have played it for white. And then you have either, you try for moves like a3 and b4 and rook c1. And this is considered very slightly better. For some people think this is just dead equal. So I've never liked this too much because you give up the bishop pair. A lot of other people think white has a small advantage. And A lot of top players agree with that because they play it as white. It's a good safe line for white where you have space, and you have the 2 center pawns to 1, by the way, I didn't mention that. You have these pawns against this, and of course that's cramped, that piece, and you have some control over e5. Whether that's enough for the more than enough for the 2 bishops is not clear. It's plenty for sure. White's never risking being worse than equal. The line I like is the one that got more and more popular, I think, partly because Kasparov used it, which is just going here and then unpinning this knight. And you have ideas of, for example, if he plays here. Well, okay, so what's happened here? Well, you have good development, and you have 2 pawns against 1 in the center, and black is still cramped. So black needs a plan here. And white's going to just play here and castle. I've won a couple games with this line. And maybe play e4 too. e4 is another big move. So now a lot of people say to throw this in. I can't remember why. Maybe so you can have g5 later in some positions. Now you might ask, there's a couple obvious questions here about piling up on this knight. And the cleverest way to do it is this, actually. So that if you play here, which I don't think is the best move, black can play this idea of playing here on this pawn. And then if c4, of course, you lose the queen. So that's an idea. The thing is, though, that white can defend this. And then black has this idea of taking, this clever idea of taking, and then playing bishop b4 anyway. And white can ignore that and play a gambit, but it's sort of not clear because even this a pawn hangs in some lines. So I think after bishop here, don't remember the exact things that are going on here. Here's how to avoid all that as white. I studied this years ago. I don't know how often this has been played. And the way to avoid it is put your bishop on c4 because that oh, whoops, no. Sorry about that. Rook c1 first, I think is how it goes. Yeah, and then after this and this, you play here, after which the knight c3 idea really isn't any good anymore because of this hanging. I think here you can just castle. And this is just a very strong position for white. He's way ahead in development. These are bad pieces. You can simply move the queen at some point and keep attacking on the king side. There might even be an a3 trick, I'm not sure. May even be an a3 move here. And if not, you can just move the queen and everything's all messed up because black wasn't able to win this extra a pawn here. So black's a pawn ahead, but he's getting creamed. So a better way to play this is sort of the standard way. That's the tricky way. The standard way is just to say, hey, I'll just attack this 3 times, but then white plays here. And been a lot of games with this, and I think white always comes out on top. So I think this is the way to play against the Cambridge Springs, and it's probably the reason the Cambridge Springs isn't played more often. There are also move order things. The minute black plays knight bd2 first, white often deviates with other variations, other move orders, which don't allow the Cambridge Springs. Okay, I hope that sort of covers that. Now what else do we have? We have more rational to learn is the queen versus rook endgame. Well, when you're lower down, that's true. Queen versus rook always wins for the queen, and there's these bizarre things the computer figures out where you put the rook way away from the king, and you have chances of getting to 50 moves. And but no one can play that in reality because they just get forked at some point. So queen versus rook should be very easy soon after you get past beginner stage, and just as you become a developing player, you should be able to do that very easily. Whereas rook versus bishop and rook is a mess, and you probably will get that. It's also very instructive. You'll probably get that at some point, and it's just good to know. It's a real good exercise going over those lines and trying to figure out what's going on. It's good calculation exercise, good visualization exercise to answer the earlier feller. All right, so that's the Cambridge Springs, and a little comment about the French and Chigorin. Yeah, the idea being that in the French and Chigorin you tend to give up the bishop pair, but I am a big fan of the bishop pair, and I tend to play it. I tend to play for the bishop pair in many different openings and games. Okay, so we have no more chat questions, so I think I'll just move on here, since we have really plenty of time. Okay, this is Harry Bell. Should we do that game next? Oh wait, I skipped a question. Yeah, what is the greatest attacking game that no one knows about? So I think I don't know what the greatest attacking game that nobody knows about, but as someone who's looked at a lot of tournament games over the years and written all these books, I can testify there are many brilliant games that you can't find in the standard brilliancy analogies, and I think they're much better games than anything you'll find in those analogies, because those analogies are, those anthologies, excuse me, did I say analogies? Those anthologies of top games are really famous games mostly. I mean, they can be quite brilliant, but they're not, you know, if you really had a list, they might be the 200th most brilliant game ever played or something like that, because obscure games never get picked for the great, you know, great brilliant game anthologies. It's usually some world champion or something that got a lot of attention. There may be a few exceptions to that, but mostly, if you look around these days especially, there's just one brilliant game after another. If you get a collection of recent games and just go over all of them, which is of course impossible, you'll find just all kinds of fantastic games. So that's what I feel. So for me, really, what do I mean by that? Well, at least tactically, for attacking games, which is mostly what we're talking about, for me, if you show me a position and you say there's a brilliancy here, you know, like any exercise book, if I can't find it, basically, because somewhere on the fifth or sixth move there's some fantastic and subtle, or even on the fourth move or something, there's some move that I can't find when I'm trying to solve it, even though I know there's a brilliancy there. That to me is becoming a pretty special game. Whereas so many of the ones in the books, it's just one or two moves where you see the idea. And once you know there's a brilliancy there, they're pretty easy to find. I mean, for example, well, not necessarily easy, but at least you can find them as long as there's not a lengthy, a really subtle move later, or just a very strong move that's very hard to visualize. We're back to visualization. An example of that is the famous Fischer game of the century, where I'm sure if I was playing the game, I'd never see it. But it's really just a two-mover. So once I saw it, even as a kid, and knowing that there was a brilliancy there, I found it fairly easily, because the things at the end are all just windmill checks, and they're really simple. So there's a lot of that in great brilliancies that are considered historically great brilliancies. Often are quite not really that hard. And the hardest part was just knowing there was a brilliancy. But of course that's true of all the great brilliancies. It's almost impossible to realize there was something in the position. So anyway, I was going to show you the game Serper Nicolaides, because that's one of my favorites. And I have written about it. Unfortunately, I don't write down. I should start collecting the brilliancies that I see every year, every month. I find all these great games, and I just don't write them down. I just kind of look at them with amazement. So let me just show you this game. Talk about it a little bit. Well, I won't talk about it that much. We'll just look at it, and I'll talk about a few variations. But this is a good example of a game that I think escaped notice. Even though I did put it in one of my books, and that, unfortunately, is not the game. So that's a bad sign, because I don't have the game there, the right game. And I'm going to check my library really quickly. I'm sorry about this. And if I can't find it, we won't do it. But it'd be very nice to find this game. Let me go down. I put this in my library, and for some reason it's not there. There it is, 376. And I just pulled that up. Oh, I probably put the wrong Serper Nicolaides game in there. They played a couple times. I'm afraid I put the wrong one in there. And that's going to take too long to correct. Darn. Oh, that's too bad. Oh, no, this is it. Who knows what I did? Don't ask me what I did. Okay, good. We've got it. It's a modern defense. Someone asked about how to play against a modern defense. And that's actually the way I like to play, and I mentioned that. But since it allows the King's Indian, for example, and since it allows a lot of other lines, what I talked about mainly was the modern defense without c4 when we were giving that answer, because most people don't want to commit to a King's Indian. Okay, so this turns into a King's Indian and plays that knight ge2. The very first week or second week we had this show back in September or something, we talked at some length about knight ge2 and how to play it for black. I don't know if you remember that. I had a question about it. Okay, black's playing for this move b5. We're not going to talk about opening theory here. This is a brilliancy game. Nice move for white. I mean, an interesting idea to tie black down. White's just developed. Both sides are developing. They're making very logical moves. Black's attacking here, and notice that knight has very few good squares to go to, so it has to go backwards. And then it's going, excuse me, and it's going to come back to f2 and try to have influence on the center that way. Black's trying to attack by taking over the dark squares. You know, moves like this, taking over these squares, and maybe even supported by this if you can sacrifice a piece on g3, for example. So black has a typical King's Indian attack, but white is centralized, so it's a sort of a trade-off. Black plays there so that he can anchor the knight there, but that's kind of a good sign for white, just because at least the queen isn't headed that way anymore. White recentralizes, and black now is going to come up with another piece. Like if he could put a knight there, it'd be wonderful. Or maybe a knight here. He'll have two knights aiming that way. So white needs to figure out something to do against this. And he does. He comes up with a really nice idea here. Okay, so this is the idea. He attacks this side of the board, and since that pawn's pinned, he's threatening to win a pawn there. Black plays the natural move, and now white plays this. And I don't know exactly how much he saw, but he did make comments about this game, and he saw a heck of a lot. Not everything maybe, but okay, so he gives up a piece. And what does he give up a piece for? Well, to get these connected passed pawns. Now to me, that's it's a little crazy already. I mean, I wouldn't play. I'm almost sure I wouldn't play this combination. You have to see a lot, and you have to. This part of this is just instinctive. Most of it is direct calculation, but part of it is instinctive. That just having that is enough. I mean, when I was a kid, I'd do this sometimes, but the GM I was playing against would just refute it. So, because a piece is worth more than two pawns, obviously, than one pawn, and you can't always push these pawns forward. I guess the first idea is to play like that, keep the king in the center. So let's just see what happens. Black plays very naturally here to stop knight e4, and expands and gives his king an extra square if he needs it. It's just very natural. And then the first main point of this was to play this move first, even though that allows easy blockading. Look how easy it is to blockade those squares. But he's got a specific idea. The queen doesn't have anywhere really good to go to, as it turns out. Can't go to a7 because that's attacked indirectly. b7 is going to lose a tempo. d7 is going to lose the pawns advancing. So he plays there. What could be more natural? But now white has this. Whoops, white has this. And this he had to have seen when he played knight d5, but he also had to calculate this well. Why would this work? Okay, he's trying to win the queen. Really incredibly brilliant. And now where's the queen going to go? It's the same question. So the queen takes the pawn. If the queen goes back, then these pawns just become very strong. It's not that they're just going to win the piece back. It's that they're going to overwhelm the position. And actually, in the end, white's just going to end up either checkmating or winning massive material here. So, very beautiful idea. And he has to have seen that, but he also has to have seen the move that was actually made, which was, excuse me. Oh, what happened here? Oh, that was queen d7, excuse me. So the move that's actually made is he simply took that. And now we have two pieces. But white gets a rook. Now the point is everything's still blockaded. These pawns are still blockaded. It really looks like black can just consolidate now with all kinds of tremendous moves and then just castle. And white's pieces are all messed up. All he's got is one active rook. But the point is he saw that he had a combination here, because two pieces for a rook is just good for black now. Except he's got this idea. Okay, black attacks there, and white plays that move of all things, just giving this up. And black plays there to blockade against d7s and rook g7s and things like that. And let me see. Oh yeah, look at this. This is fantastic. What's wrong with f takes e3? Does anybody see this? The queen's attacked. So this rook c7, well, isn't going to work anyway because of queen takes. And d7 check is impossible. And you might go, well, he can take there, but it's just too slow. But it turns out he has this wonderful move, which is this one. And as I say, when the post-mortem was there and the notes and things, when he's talking about his game, he saw a lot of this, an awful lot of this. And then black wins another piece, and white can either take it or move. No, he has to take it, because otherwise there's this check. And now he's lost, because after take, he's threatening queen takes, and after takes, there's a mate. Isn't that something? And there's just no options here. It's just a fantastic, and the attack continues. If you even could give up the queen, which I don't think you can effectively, there's an attack which is going to win anyway. Just a gorgeous, gorgeous idea. Okay, but what did happen? Let me revert here. So black saw that apparently and played that way. Just didn't take the bishop. And white takes another piece. I don't know if all this is obvious to you, but it certainly wasn't to me. And now stops black from castling and threatens things like queen check and maybe this move after all. Nice slow move. And by the way, it gives up the bishop. So black takes the bishop. Now I can show you there's just tons of wonderful lines here. What's our time here? Oh, we're getting late. So you might want to look up this game and figure out some of it yourself. But it turns out, well, I mean, a really nice. I'll show you one. I mean, there's so many. You can imagine in a brilliancy like this how many lines there are. But one of them is very nice. You still give up the bishop going there, thinking about moves like this, for example. And there's only one answer because of the knight there is just too strong. For example, knight there, knight to g5, queen e8, rook a8, and you win by diverting the queen. White's starting to come out short of material here, you'll notice. So queen e8 immediately is the most obvious move, and now oddly enough you take the queens off, which is more than amazing. If king takes, rook a8 check is mate because of knight g5. And if knight takes, then I think you just take this. I think there's going to be those pawns are going to win. Yeah, amazingly enough, these pawns just march now. That's just a completely winning position. So, beautiful stuff. And let me see, did this happen? No, he actually ended up taking the bishop immediately here. Okay, check. Sorry, that's not right. Let me revert. That was a variation after all. Oh, that was if he comes back, which seems like a solid defensive move. But instead he simply took. And white took the play check as before and took this. And this sure does look strong because there's a mate threat, right? But you are giving up yet another piece here. And it turns out he has to play here, and even that has a weird result later. Now there's an interesting moves like check and here, giving up the queen to do that, but then white's pawns win after all. So the c6 wins anyway. There's a rook e7 that comes next, even if the king tries to get away. There's going to be a rook e7, which is going to win more than a piece. So the pawns will queen anyway. That's not obvious at first because you're 2 pieces ahead, but you can go check that out. It's amazing stuff. And if he plays knight g3 check, oh, I'm sorry, this is here. Knight g3 check is actually kind of interesting. Yeah, I'm not going to show you that. It turns out there's all kinds of threats for black of playing check and then queening, but it's going to take too long to show you. In the end, it doesn't work. So he plays queen e8, obvious move, right? And then this is the beautiful thing that he had to see a long ways ahead, because actually white had a lot of options here, but he must have seen this somewhere, maybe not from the very beginning, but somewhere a little ways back. He saw this beautiful move, which crowns the combination. It turns out, by the way, if he takes and checks, this knight g3 check move eventually wins for black, amazingly enough. So takes, check, here, here. That seems to almost win the game, right? It looks like it's winning the queen, and you might think, oh, well, I could see that, or this and that profound. But look at what he had to see after this. Here, takes that. Now black has tons of material here, and there's only one passed pawn left. And there's moves like e4 coming, freeing the bishop. So why is it that white is winning this? Well, he plays check, and it turns out that's pretty much a forced move. You can look at these things. I don't think I'm going to do much more of that. But then you play here. So the same idea of leaving the queen hanging but pushing. So it's got even the same theme twice. Now if he takes, the pawn can't be stopped from queening. So black counterattacks, which is kind of fun. And if he takes this, this now wins. Takes and then bishop e5. So this e4 move is actually quite good. It keeps the queen hanging. And white plays here, thinking about getting another queen. And black plays here with extra doubled pawns. And fortunately, this check, first he makes some repetition. I think I didn't show the repetition. Check back. Oh, he repeats here. And now plays this move, queening, and which finally culminates the combination. So it's really very cute. It's a very cute idea. They make a few more moves actually. There's one more cute idea here. check. Now, if he doesn't check, well, let's just keep going here. Because, you know, he's still got two pieces, and that pass pawn, those two pass pawns could be bothersome. But he manages to time everything correctly here. Okay, so he takes that pawn. I think I'm missing a few variations here, but that's okay. Oh, and now he resigns. Okay, so there wasn't much going on there. I guess the last trick would be, no, he doesn't resign, excuse me. He plays this, and white takes it. Because if he takes here, you've got that. So there's tricks to the very end. And then takes here, one last trick here. If he takes that, there's a queen, but unfortunately he just takes here. I'm sorry, he just goes back. If he takes there, there's the fork again. But he goes back, and now there's no more tricks. So that's it, he resigns. He can try one last kind of thing here, but then he just chases the knight away. And I don't think there's much to look at here. Okay, so that's uses up our time completely, unfortunately, but good. You like the game. Somebody likes the game. Triangle system, we'll try to get that next time. I'll copy all these questions down. It's only one. Please send me more questions. I got through more of them today than I thought I was going to. You're sending me great questions. I love the historical ones, by the way. They're kind of cool. And I'll talk about the triangle system next time. Okay, what else here? Yeah, I guess that's about it, folks. So try and send me more questions. Once again, there's Ask I Am Watson at chessclub.com and John L. Watson on the ICC. If you have an ICC account, just send me John L. Watson. And I thought I was going to say one other thing, but thanks so much for asking these questions, and I will get back to you next week.